Hi, I'm Jamin. Welcome to the class. In this class, we're going to look at present simple versus present continuous. So by the end of the class, you should be better able to use these two tenses correctly. During this class, there will be some questions for you to answer. You can find these below the video. I will tell you when to answer the question, and I will give you some time to do so. Okay, let's get started. We're going to start by looking at a short story showing us our language in context. Let's start by reading this sentence. Every day, I go for a run in the park. I usually run for 30 minutes, but today I am running for an hour. Now, we're going to look at three questions here that we want to answer about these sentences. I'd like you to take a moment, look at the questions, and I'd like you to think about what would be your answer to these three questions. Think about it. Let's answer these together, starting with question number one. What do I do every day? Let's highlight the answer in the sentence. So every day I go for a run in the park. Question number two, how long do I usually run? Well, we see the answer is I usually run for 30 minutes. Now, question number three, what am I doing differently today? And we see the answer, but today I am running for an hour. Now, let's continue with the second part of this story and another question. Let's look at this. I always stretch before I start running, and right now I am stretching my legs. After my run, I walk for 10 minutes to cool down. At the moment, I am thinking about walking around the lake after my run. And let's look at our last question here. Question number four. What am I doing right now as I speak? I'd like you to look at the question below the slide, and I'd like you to write two words. What are the two actions that I am doing right now as I speak? Please write the answer. So the two actions that I am doing is, first of all, stretching, and second of all, thinking. So thinking about walking around the lake after my run. So these are two things that are happening now in the moment. We have here in these sentences present simple and present continuous. And we're going to focus now on how we use these two forms correctly in English. Let's start with present simple. There are two reasons that we use present simple. First of all, we use this for things that are repeated, regular actions, something that is every day, every week, every year. And we see in the example sentence, every day, I go for a run in the park. This happens again and again and again, and we use present simple. Another reason is for things that are generally or always true. In the example, I teach English. So this is something that is generally true. It's my job. Secondly, they speak Spanish. This is something that is always true. This is their language. And so for both of these, generally true and always true, we also use present simple. Let's look now at how we form present simple. There are two forms depending on the person, the pronoun we would use in the sentence. Starting with I, you, we, and they. In the positive form, we simply use the verb by itself. I run, you run, they teach. In the negative form, we add do not. So I do not run, you do not run. And very often we will use the contracted form of don't. Lastly, in the question form, we begin with do, followed by the pronoun or the person. Do I run? Do they run? Now, with he, she, and it, we use the verb, but we add an S on the end of the verb. So We would say he runs, she runs, it teaches. In the negative form, we would use does not. And very often this is contracted to doesn't, she doesn't teach, it doesn't teach, and so on. And lastly, in the question form, we begin with does followed by the pronoun or the person. So does he teach? Does she teach? And so on. Now, let's contrast this with present continuous. We use present continuous for things that are happening right now as we are speaking in this present moment. In the example, I am stretching my legs. It is happening right now. Another time that we use present continuous is when we are talking about a temporary action that is happening in this general period of time. And the point here is that it is a temporary action. It is not always true. It is not again and again and again. It is temporary. And in our example, she is doing a 2-month course in the UK. Now let's look at the form of present continuous. There are three forms that we use depending on the pronoun, beginning with I. With I, we use the word am, and then we have the verb and ing. And often this is contracted, I'm doing. When we go to the negative form, we add the word not. I am not doing. Lastly, in the question form, we are simply going to reverse the order of the pronoun and the verb. So we would say, am I doing as the question form. Going to you, we, and they, we switch to are, and this will often be contracted. You're, we're, they're doing. Next, in the negative form, it is are not. So you are not, but again, often contracted. So you're not, they're not, we're not. And finally, in the question form, again, we reverse the order. Are they doing? Are you doing? Lastly, with he, she, and it. In the positive form, we use is, and this is contracted. So he's doing, it's doing. When we go to the negative form, we add the word not, and he isn't doing, she isn't doing, again, often using that contraction. And finally, with the question form, again, we just reverse. So is he doing, is it doing, and so on. Now, we're going to look at a little bit of practice here based on what we have learned about how to correctly use present simple and present continuous. We have two pictures here of a woman working. I'd like you to look at the two sentences here. And we need to think about what is the correct verb form to use in the sentence. So it is either present simple or present continuous. Let's look at our first sentence here, and let's look at our three options. Below the video, I'd like you to choose for this question, what is the correct option to complete this sentence? All right. So the correct choice here is present simple. She usually works in an office. This is the normal routine, and it happens again and again and again and again. It is repeated. Now, going to our second sentence, let's look at our options. Again, below the video, can you look at those choices and choose the correct option? So the correct choice here is the present continuous form because we are talking about a now action at this moment. So we would say she's working at home now. We're going to look now at an important area to understand when we are choosing if we should use present simple or present continuous. There are a type of verb called stative verbs. And let's understand what is this verb? What are these? A stative verb is a verb that describes a state or a condition. And most importantly, it is not describing an action. Okay? The verb is about a state or a condition. With stative verbs, we do not usually use these with present continuous. It is not correct normally to use a state verb in the continuous form with the ing, and we use these verbs with present simple. Now let's look at a few examples of some very common stative verbs. When we are talking about have in the sense of possession, okay, it is mine or it is yours, we do not use the ing form. In addition, with the verb know, need, like, love, hate, believe, see, understand, and want, these are all stative verbs. They're not describing an action, they're describing a state or a condition of a thing. Let's look at a couple of examples, looking at what is the correct way to talk about these things in English. In our first example, with the word have, we would not use the present continuous form to describe something that we have, that's ours. So we would use present simple, and this is the correct form. I have a dog. When we are talking about liking or like something, again, we don't use the continuous form usually. We would use present simple. So if we're talking about pizza, they like pizza. So when we have a state verb, we are going to use present simple, and we do not use present continuous in order to describe these things. We're going to continue now by doing some practice with some sentences about what we have learned in the class. Let's look at our first sentence, sentence one. In sentence number one, we need to choose in the two gaps what is the correct option, either present simple or present continuous, in order to complete these sentences. Below the video, I'd like you to look at the next two questions and choose the correct option. So, for the first gap, the correct choice is loves coffee. And this is because it is generally true, or maybe always true. This is how she feels. Secondly, drinks, because this is a repeated action that happens again and again and again every morning. And so we would use the present simple. Let's look at sentence number two. Again, below the video, I'd like you to look at the next two questions and choose the correct option. So in that first gap, we would use takes because this is a usual action. In the second gap, we are talking about today. And so because this is in the present time moment, we would use present continuous. But today, he's walking. Let's look at sentence number three. Again, below the video, can you please answer the next two questions? So for this sentence, we're talking about right now in the present moment. And so that means we would use the present continuous. Right now, we aren't watching TV. We're reading books. So we choose to use the present continuous because we're talking about right now in this moment what is happening. Let's look at our final sentence in number four. Again, below the video, can you please answer the next two questions by choosing the correct option? So in the first gap, we use lives, the present simple form. Monica lives in Paris. This is generally true. This is her home. But this week, moving on to the second gap, she's working in Madrid. And here we use the present continuous form because we are talking about a temporary action in the present moment. We're going to finish up today by creating questions in present simple and present continuous. Let's look at our first question that we're going to create. In this question, we have the beginning of the question and we have the end of the question. We need to use those two words in the brackets in the center to create a correct present simple or present continuous question. Below the video, I'd like you to look at the next question, and I'd like you to write the three words that we need in the center of this question so it is a correct question. So our correct question would be, what time do you like to eat lunch? And this is present simple question. Let's look at number two. Again, we have the beginning and we have the end of the question. We need to use those center words in the brackets to form the correct question. Below the video, can you please answer the next question? And can you write the four words that we need to complete this question? So the correct question would be, where is your brother traveling this week? And this is a present continuous question because we are talking about a temporary action this week. Let's go to our final question, number three. Again, looking at the beginning and at the end of the question. Use those words in the brackets in the center. I'd like you to answer the next question below the video with the three words we need to complete this question. So the correct question here would be, why does he believe that we should use more renewable energy? And this is a present simple question because we are talking about his belief. We are talking about something that is generally or perhaps always true for this person. Okay, that's the end of the class. Hopefully you now have a better understanding of how to correctly use present simple and present continuous. Thank you for watching.